It was an ordinary night when I returned home from work on time as usual. But when I opened the door, I realized that there was something wrong with the atmosphere in the house. Usually at this time, my wife Peggy would be busy in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Today, the house was quiet and still. I went inside and saw Peggy sitting on the couch in the living room, staring expressionlessly at the soap opera on the TV. "Honey, are you okay?" I asked with concern. Concerned, but Peggy ignored me, still staring at the screen, not even knowing if she had heard me. I walked up to her and realized that her eyes were a little out of focus and she seemed to be in some kind of deep meditation. "Peggy?" I called out again, finally getting her attention, and Peggy slowly looked up and stared at me with a strange, cold look in her eyes for a moment before speaking. "Rob, we need to talk?" Just such a simple sentence, but let me feel an overwhelming sense of uneasiness enveloping. My heart sank, and an ominous feeling arose. Peggy had never spoken to me in such a solemn tone before, and it seemed that whatever we were going to talk about, it was definitely not a good thing. "Talk? About what?" I asked hesitantly, secretly preparing myself for her to ask for overtime or be accused of something. Peggy took a deep breath, as if making a final decision. "Rob, I think we need to live apart for a while." It was like a hammer blow to my head. I froze in place and my mind went blank for a few seconds. Separation? That word never came up between us. Although we occasionally have some small quarrels and conflicts like all couples, but never so intense that we need to separate the point. You. What did you say?" I stammered, trying to make sure I'd heard correctly. "That's literally it, Rob." Peggy's tone was firm and calm. "I need some time alone to figure out if there's any point in continuing our marriage." Halfway through the conversation, I was already feeling a sense of shock and insecurity like never before. Our marriage? Continue? These words exploded in my mind like a missile, destroying the relationship we had worked so hard to maintain for the past 10 years. But, but why?" I asked helplessly. "Is there something wrong between us? Did I do something wrong? If so, please tell me. I'll make it right." Peggy shook her head, interrupting my rambling. "It's not your fault, honey. It's just, I needed some time alone to think." I looked into my wife's eyes, which had once shone with happiness, but were now covered with a thick layer of gloom. I couldn't understand what she was thinking, nor could I guess the reason behind her sudden decision. But I knew that at this juncture, arguing was futile. So I nodded in agreement. "Well, if that's what you want." My voice was a little hoarse. "I'll move somewhere else for a while, to give you plenty of space to think. But no matter what, I still love you. And I hope you make the right decision in the end." Peggy's eyes grew a little dim as she said softly, "Thanks for understanding, Rob." This was the beginning of our separation. That night, I packed some simple things and went to my friend Tom's apartment. The moment I left the house, I had mixed feelings. I didn't know if I had done something wrong or if Peggy just needed a break. Either way, I had no choice but to respect her decision and give her the space and time she needed. Little did I know that this separation would become a major turning point in my life, completely changing my views on marriage and love. The first day I checked into Tom's house, he asked me about the reason for our separation, but I could only make a gesture of helplessness. Tom could see that I was not in a good mood, so he did not linger on the subject. He settled me in the guest room and prepared a nice dinner for me, hoping to distract me from the situation. Although Tom and his wife, Tanya, were very kind and considerate, I was a little distracted throughout the night. Peggy's words kept echoing in my head, and I repeated them over and over again, scrutinizing their meaning, trying to find some clues. But the more I thought about it, the more confused I became, and I couldn't see the real reason for her separation. Seeing that I was in such a low state, they didn't say anything. After the meal, I went back to the guest room alone, tossing and turning on the bed, tormented by all sorts of thoughts that made it almost impossible to sleep. These days lasted for a week, and I lived a life of fear every day, afraid that Peggy would ask for a divorce at the next moment. One day, about a month or so later, I couldn't take the heartbreak anymore and decided to talk to Peggy myself. What if she just needed a little time alone to calm down? Maybe there is just some small misunderstanding between us, which can be resolved through communication. With a glimmer of hope, I plucked up the courage to step into that familiar home again. Peggy, are you there? I shouted as I stood in the living room. The house was still as neat and organized as ever, and there was no sign that Peggy had made any changes. Rob? Came a slightly tired voice from the bedroom. I hurriedly followed her in and saw Peggy sitting cross-legged on the bed, wearing loungewear, her hair a little messy. We hadn't seen her for more than a month, and she looked thinner than before, with dark circles under her eyes. How have you been? I asked with concern. Peggy nodded gently and said nothing. I took a deep breath and decided to get right to the point and ask the question that had been bothering me. Peggy, what's wrong? Why are you talking about separation? Did I do something wrong? Or you do not love me anymore? When I said those last few words, there was a choking sound in my voice. Just saying the words, don't love me anymore, made me feel as if I were afraid that this was the truth. Peggy frowned, as if hesitating to tell me the truth. After a long time, she said, Rob, we did have some problems in our marriage. But it's not entirely your fault. I'm partly to blame. What the hell is going on? Please tell me the truth. I already know the truth, I said anxiously. Peggy sighed and lowered her head in silence. All that could be heard in the room for a while was the sound of both of us breathing heavily. Rob, She was hesitant to speak, as if hesitating to say what she wanted to say. I held my breath, staring intently at the side of my wife's face, waiting for her to speak. Something did happen to me recently that made me question the meaning of our marriage. But talking about it now might hurt you in our relationship. Peggy weighed her words. So, maybe we need more time to figure this out. I froze on the spot. From her vague answer, I could only guess one conclusion. There was some third party involved, influencing her view of our marriage. I almost broke down. 1,000 words came to me, but in the end they were reduced to a feeble question. What the hell is going on? Peggy shook her head without further explanation. It seems that today it is difficult for me to ask a reason from her mouth. Very well. If you don't want to talk about it just yet, then so be it. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my last ounce of calm. I'll give you time to tell me when you're ready. But please think twice before you make decisions you'll regret for the rest of your life. With those words, I turned around and left the bedroom, walking out of that once cozy home without looking back. Disappointment, anger, fear, all kinds of complex emotions were swirling in my brain. As I walked back to Tom's house, I was afraid that I would lose my mind on the way. Luckily, Tom and Tanya were not at home. Otherwise, I would have been involved in a whirlpool of explanations. During the weeks leading up to my separation from Peggy, I was on edge. I kept repeating in my mind what she had said when she filed for separation, trying to find clues and clues. I even decided to hire a private investigator just to find out what she was hiding. In the midst of my struggle, a truth that I never thought I'd see came crashing down on me. One day, I was visiting my friends Tom and Tanya for dinner. At first, the three of them talked and laughed at the dinner table, and the atmosphere was harmonious. But when the topic of Peggy came up, Tom and Tanya's faces suddenly turned ugly. What's wrong with you two? I asked suspiciously, noticing the change in their expressions. Tom and Tanya looked at each other as if they were secretly debating whether or not they should tell me the truth. Finally, Tanya coughed lightly and spoke with some concern. Rob, we may need to tell you the truth about Peggy. My heart was pounding, and I already had a bad feeling from Tanya's serious demeanor. What the hell is going on? Do you know something? I asked, unable to hide the anxiety in my voice. Tom sighed and looked at me worriedly. We didn't know about this until recently, Rob. You have to be prepared. Just tell me straight out. What the hell happened? I raised my voice, interrupting Tom. Tom and Tanya looked at each other again, as if they were checking whether the other was really going to tell the truth. Finally, Tanya nodded, and Tom continued. Rob, Peggy. She's been, for over a year now, maintaining an inappropriate relationship now. What? My eyes widened in disbelief. Are you saying Peggy cheated on me? Tom nodded, his face apologetic. Yes, I apologize for telling you so late. What happened next was like a nightmare. My mind went blank. My blood seemed to be drained out of my body, and even breathing became difficult. I had thought that Peggy had filed for separation for some reason in her marriage, but now it seemed that she had taken a new lover. Anger, betrayal, shame. All these complex emotions raged like a storm in my heart. I couldn't believe that I was the last one to know the truth. Did all my friends and family already know behind the scenes? Why didn't they tell me earlier? Were they laughing at my stupid husband? You guys, you all knew about this? I questioned Tom and Tanya dumbly. The two nodded awkwardly, the apologetic look on their faces intensifying. We only found out a short time ago. At that time, just saw the scene of Peggy and that man walking together, also not sure. I didn't realize that the truth was so shocking. Tom didn't go on, but just spread his hands helplessly. I could tell that he was also very upset and ashamed of my situation. Who is it? Who is that man? My voice trembled, but I couldn't hide my anger. Tanya hesitated, but finally told me the name that was killing me. His name is Adam White, one of Peggy's coworkers. The name Adam White was a bomb that exploded in my heart and shattered all my illusions and hopes. Years of love, years of commitment, years of trust, all crushed by a guy named Adam White. I felt so humiliated and angry that I wanted to rush out right now and ask that asshole for the truth. You all knew about this. Why didn't you ever tell me? I questioned Tom and Tanya through gritted teeth. I'm sorry, Rob. We also thought it was just a misunderstanding at the time. So we didn't dare to be arbitrary. Who would have thought that things would have developed to this point? Tom looked at me sympathetically. If you're willing to listen, we'll tell you everything we know. Next, Tom and Tanya told me the details of what they knew. I didn't say a word, just listened silently, staring at the table without moving. When they finished, I let out a long breath, feeling as if my life had been crushed to pieces. It turns out that my wife had been having an affair behind my back for years and years and years of our lives. Whenever she said she had to work overtime, to socialize or to travel, there might be that Adam White guy waiting for her in the shadow. But I, the idiot Joe, didn't realize the gravity of the situation and thought she was just too preoccupied with her work. That night, I stayed up almost sleepless until morning. My mind was filled with all sorts of speculations and questions, and I tossed and turned, pondering the meaning of this marriage. If, as Tom and Tanya said, Peggy hadn't been faithful to our relationship for over a year, was there any reason for our marriage to continue? The next morning, I left Tom's house early and drove straight to Peggy's office building. The anger in my heart was at its peak, and I wanted to see the truth for myself and not listen to anyone else. Peggy's office building is located in the center of the city, towering over the clouds, with a layer of metal-coated facade glittering in the sun. I walked straight into the lobby, wanting to go straight in, but when I was asked by the security guard, I realized that it was the weekend and Peggy would not be in the office. I had to hold back my anger and go around to Peggy's in our house. Sure enough, her car was parked in the driveway, and it appeared that she had stayed home. My mood suddenly quieted, and I felt an indescribable calm. The anger of the last few hours had burned away and was replaced by a strong desire to find out what had happened. I made up my mind. No matter how Peggy answered, I have to hear the painful truth from her mouth. If she admits it, we will break up and divorce. If she denies it, I will not hesitate to choose to end this relationship with her. Because her cheating behavior is more than obvious fact, Tom and Tanya witnessed the evidence is there. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. After a while, Peggy opened the door. I could see at a glance that she looked tired and helpless, and her former glowing appearance had long since disappeared. When she saw that it was me, her face became even bleaker and more helpless. "Shouldn't you be staying at Tom's?" she asked, opening the door. "What brings you here?" "Yeah, I shouldn't have come." I nodded, my tone flat. But there was something I had to confirm in person. I took a deep breath and spoke solemnly. "Peggy, have you been having an inappropriate relationship with another man?" Peggy's demeanor froze, and she took an involuntary half-step back. "So you already know?" "After a long time," she replied quietly. "Is that why you're separating?" I asked. I pressed. "Because you can't be in a relationship anymore?" Peggy bit her lip and avoided my gaze. Only after a long time did she nod her head gently in answer to my question. This action was like a heavy punch, hitting me hard in the heart. Trying to maintain my composure, I continued to ask, "How long have you been in a relationship? Who is it? Is it your coworker Adam White?" Peggy's body visibly shook, and it looked like I had completely exposed her lie. After learning that Peggy had lied to me and betrayed me for years, I was filled with anger and the urge for revenge. I began to think calmly about how I could give Peggy a head start and make her pay for it. First of all, the financial aspect. At the beginning of our separation, I have already begun to transfer most of the family funds to a secret account. So as to avoid future separation into a divorce, the division of property will bring me too much loss. After all, our savings over the years were almost all built up by me, and Peggy just stayed at home to raise her children. Next, I began to use her credit card hard overdraft and took the opportunity to avenge box after box. As long as it was a luxury item of some value, I would go online or to a physical store, regardless of the price. Within a few weeks, I maxed out all of Peggy's credit cards. And just in case she found out beforehand, I changed the address I sent the bills to Tom's address. Tom was shocked when he found out about my behavior and tried to discourage me from doing such a harmful thing. But after learning the fact that Peggy cheated on him, his attitude loosened up a lot. As a friend who knows both of us best, he could feel the anger and aggression in my heart. So in the end, Tom chose to sit back and watch, neither supporting me nor blocking my behavior. When Peggy finally realized something was wrong and confronted me, I told her the whole story. Of course, I wouldn't admit to cheating on her. I just said that I had already prepared all the procedures for the divorce, bank accounts and credit cards were already under my control, and there was no need to ask for her consent. Peggy was so angry that at one point she wanted to call the police on me, but she was soon crushed by the fact that I had agreed to a divorce. After all, there was no longer any reason for us to be together, and she accepted this as a reality. After giving Peggy such financial retribution, there was still an emptiness in my heart. Money is not enough. I want to hurt her self-esteem. So, I began to plan to experience the pleasure of cheating. As I expected, it didn't take me long to find a new bedmate, my friend Tanya. Tanya, one of my best friends from college, is now married with a child. However, she and her husband, Tom, have been having some marital problems. Tom suffers from some sort of male biological complication that has prevented them from having children for many years. I only learned of this privacy by accident. Later, when I told Tanya the reason for my separation from Peggy, she made a bold and somewhat crazy request of me. It was on a weekend afternoon when I was visiting Tom's house, and Tanya took me aside privately. "Rob, I understand how bad you must be feeling right now, but I have a favor to ask you." Tanya looked at me shyly, her cheeks flushed. "What is it? Just tell me." Curiosity filled my mind. Tanya took a deep breath and seemed to be working up the courage. "I know this may sound crazy, but will you help me and Tom have a baby?" "What?" I was taken aback, staring at her with suspicion. "You mean, you're telling me you're gonna help you guys get pregnant?" Tanya nodded her head in a panic, as if she had made up her mind to make the request. I felt more embarrassed than ever. "But Tanya, this is crazy. How could you even think of doing this? I'm your best friend. You're not asking me to cheat on you?" I know it sounds irrational," Tanya explained anxiously, "but as you know, Tom's had that problem for a couple of years now. No matter how hard we try, we can't get what we want. But having a child is so important to us, Rob. It's the biggest dream of Tom and I's marriage. If you're really willing to help, we'll remember this favor." I looked at Tanya in disbelief, struggling for a moment to answer whether or not she would agree. "You don't have to give me an answer yet, just think about it." Tanya looked at me expectantly. "Whatever you decide, we will always value our friendship. But if you can really help, it would be the most appreciated thing Tom and I have ever done in our lives." Afterward, I sat alone in Tom's guest room and thought about it for a long time. My heart was conflicted. Tanya's request was so deviant. It was almost as if I was sitting alone in Tom's guest room, thinking about it for a long time afterward. My heart was conflicted. Tanya's request was so deviant that it was tantamount to asking me to commit adultery with her and betray my friends. But on the other hand, if I can really help them fulfill their biggest dream and make a happy family come into being, Isn't it also a good thing? What's more, after years of Peggy's betrayal, I've developed a deep resentment towards her. If I also do a cheating thing, that just let us too clear? Anyway, she has already betrayed me first. I'm just returning the favor. After a night of deliberation, I approached Tanya the next day and solemnly told her, "Okay, I'll do what you want. I will do everything I can to help you and Tom conceive a child." Tanya was ecstatic and hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Rob. You are the best friend in the world. I swear, no matter what happens in the future, I will remember this favor." Since then, Tanya and I have been having some crazy personal encounters. It was all for our common goal, to get Tanya pregnant with my child. So every time afterward, we would secretly pray that this time it would work. Early one morning, about 3 months later, Tanya called and mysteriously asked me to come over right away. When I arrived at Tom's house, she excitedly told me the news of my pregnancy. We embraced each other and smiled, our hearts filled with immense joy. "This is what we have been waiting for. What should I tell Tom?" Tanya asked me with some hesitation. I thought about it and decided to answer her like this: "Just tell him you're pregnant and let him guess the rest." Tanya nodded, obviously not thinking about how to tell her husband the whole story. We both vaguely decided to bury the absurdity of the deal forever. Since then, my plan of revenge has basically been completed. Both financially and mentally, I gave Peggy a hard blow. And thanks to Tanya's request, I also experienced the thrill of cheating, to see how Peggy betrayed my feelings for many years. When the baby is born, I'll honor my promise to Tanya and be as involved as I can in the child's life. As for Peggy, I think she'll find out about Tanya and me sooner or later. And when she does, she'll realize how painful it is to be betrayed. Almost 6 months have passed since Peggy and I officially separated. During this time, our contact with each other has been virtually non-existent. I know she still lives in our old house and works at the company. But other than that, I had no idea what her life was like now. She seemed to have completely rejected me as her husband and left everything between us behind. It was during this time that my relationship with Tanya grew stronger. As her belly grew, I became involved in her life. She would regularly invite me to her and Tom's home, and Tom seemed to be understanding and tolerant. I often prayed in my heart that Tanya would have my child this time. If so, it would be the most precious bond between us, more valuable than any money or material things. At the end of the year, Tanya was about to go into labor, and I was with her day and night, not wanting to miss the delivery. I was by her side almost day and night, fearing that I would miss her delivery, and Tom didn't complain about this. He seemed to understand that I was doing this as a friend. It was a cold winter night, and the three of us were watching TV at Tom's house when Tanya suddenly clutched her stomach and her face contorted. "What's the matter, honey? Is a bout coming on?" Tom asked uneasily. Tanya just nodded, looking like she was gritting her teeth. Soon, a layer of cold sweat seeped out from her forehead. "We need to get to the hospital now. Rob, come on. Drive Tanya to the delivery room," Tom ordered loudly. Without saying a word, the three of us got into the car and drove furiously to the nearest hospital. Luckily, everything went smoothly when we arrived at the hospital. The doctor quickly delivered Tanya, and within half an hour, the three of us were celebrating the newest addition to our family. "It's a girl. Rob, look, it's a beautiful little girl." The nurse handed us the little creature. I looked at the little wrinkled face in the swaddling clothes and felt a great sense of closeness. This was the child that Tanya and I had made, that way, the most precious bond between us. "Looks like she inherited your eyes," Tanya said to me with a smile. Indeed, those eyes look like mine. Shortly after the baby was born, Tom approached me with her in his arms. "Rob, it's time for you to give her a name." I froze and didn't answer for a moment. Yes, according to the agreement, I should have the right to name the child. But what name should I give her? At that moment, a name suddenly came to my mind. Chelsea, the heroine of one of my favorite movies, Chelsea. They had the same clear eyes and innocent temperament. "Chelsea, let's call it that," I said to Tom. Tom nodded and echoed with a smile. "Chelsea, that's a nice name. It's perfect for such a cute little angel." From then on, the name Chelsea was officially given to Tanya and me. Once the birth was finalized at the hospital, Chelsea's birth certificate had my name in the father field. In the months following the birth of my child, I took the time to travel to Tom's house to visit Chelsea from time to time. And perhaps because blood is thicker than water, this child gave me a sense of closeness that I had never felt before. Every time I saw her, I felt a warmth in my heart. Without realizing it, Chelsea has become the most important link between Tanya and me. Even though we had crossed the line at one point, now that we had this child as a connection, we were even closer. As for Tom, I would observe his attitude towards Chelsea from time to time. Since Chelsea is not related to him by blood, I thought he would be a bit more indifferent to his daughter. What I didn't expect was that Tom would treat Chelsea the same way, without any reservations. From the way he looked at Chelsea, I couldn't see any resentment, only overflowing love. I admired this friend from the bottom of my heart. He accepted Chelsea's existence with grace and never even accused Tanya and I of cheating. He loved Tanya and the family so completely that he could do that. Just as Chelsea turned one, Peggy's divorce was finally filed against me. It was the end of a long relationship. The divorce proceedings in court weren't too long. Peggy got almost nothing out of it, since I had already moved most of my assets elsewhere. She only kept our original house, and I got sole custody of Chelsea. When she heard the verdict, Peggy was furious, but she had no choice but to sign the judgment. Looking at her that when she heard the verdict, Peggy, although furious, but also had no choice but to sign the judgment. Looking at her angry and helpless look, my heart did not have too many fluctuations. After such a long time of torture and entanglement, I have long had no feelings for her. Shortly after the divorce, I moved to an apartment near Tom's family so that I could see Chelsea whenever I wanted to, and Peggy was ordered to stay in our original house, but I had mortgaged it to the bank, so she didn't really own it. For a while, Peggy tried to come at me by all means, asking me why I was treating her the way I was. But every time I saw her, I would subconsciously look at the ring on her hand, her engagement ring to Adam White. So I'd just ignore her accusations and swallow them whole. Gradually, Peggy realized she couldn't make a difference and turned her attention to her new life. I heard that she quit her old job and moved to California, and so she disappeared from my life. I, on the other hand, devoted most of my time and energy to Chelsea's life. Perhaps fearing that I would become a second Tom, Tanya never discouraged my involvement in Chelsea. In fact, she welcomed and encouraged me to do so, treating Chelsea as the most precious connection between the two of us. As a result, Chelsea was naturally raised in the Tom's household. As her biological father, I often picked her up and dropped her off at school, provided her with nutritious meals, and took her on weekend outings. Sometimes Tanya would join us, but most of the time, Chelsea was just the two of us. Tom seemed to realize that he couldn't play the father role in the family and became more and more indifferent to Chelsea's affairs. But he did his best to make money and give us enough space. Over time, Chelsea came to think of me as her father and Tanya as her mother. As time went by, Chelsea grew into a lovely young woman. From time to time, the two of them would come to my apartment to stay for a while, and sometimes they would even ask to go on small trips together. I have always been 100% supportive and loving to my daughters' and lovers' requests. One summer, Chelsea began to ask me questions about why mommy and daddy lived in two places. It seemed that she was already aware and skeptical about this. Because mom and dad love each other, but they can't be married. So we had to live separately. Tanya explained as she always does. Why can't we get married? Chelsea quickly questioned again. Because one of us is married to someone else? Tanya replied politely, but now that they're gone, maybe we'll get married in the future. Sure enough, when Chelsea was 12 years old, Tanya formally asked me to marry her. The reason was not complicated. She felt that it would be the most responsible and loving thing she could do for Chelsea to have a complete family. But you still have Tom. I was hesitant. Even though Tom rarely lived with Tanya anymore, they were still legally married. Tom, he passed away. Tanya told me in a sad tone. About 6 months ago, his health didn't improve, so he passed away. I was saddened by the loss of my friend and heartbroken that Tanya would be raising Chelsea on her own. It was with this in mind that I agreed to marry her without hesitation. The wedding was a nothing affair, with only a few friends and family invited to the ceremony. But Chelsea was so happy that it took her weeks to organize the wedding herself. Mom and Dad are finally getting married. I'm so happy. My daughter was so excited that she threw her arms around both of us, and there were even tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. Looking at Chelsea's burning innocence, I suddenly felt that it was all worth it. All the betrayals, pains, and tears, all the hardships and struggles have finally come together to form this cozy family picture. Our family of three was finally able to be truly united under the bond of marriage. Life after marriage was uneventful and happy. I continued to work in my old company and came home from work on time every day. Tanya devoted herself to housekeeping and occasionally worked as a teacher in a nearby elementary school. And Chelsea, who had already grown up and was about to enter the age of youth. Peggy was forced to leave her former city and move to California after a divorce and financial crisis. She lost her family, her possessions, and her job, and her life was in limbo. My story with Tanya continues, and our daughter is growing up healthy and happy. I have kept my promise to Tom and have been a strong support to Tanya and our daughter. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.